remarks. Welcome. Thank you.
Can I first thank the Principal, Dr. Sharma, for those very kind remarks. I appreciate them. Thank you for the work you and your colleagues do in helping to develop the next generation of leaders who happen to be women for India. To Professor Pant, to my members of my delegation, but I particularly want to acknowledge the Australian High Commissioner, Philip Green, to students here today. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you, and thanks to the Observer Research Foundation for hosting the event. Thank you also for the very gracious remarks about the cricket. It's actually in such an honour to play a team like the Indian team. It's such an extraordinary team. But I want to just say this: Travis Head, he's from my hometown, so we care a lot about what happened yesterday. So I wanted to start with partnership, and in preparing for this, I'm told that the ORF, the Observer Research Foundation, does their Young Voices blog and has looks to survey young Indians' attitudes to the world. And a number of those surveys say that you see us, that is Australia, as one of your closest partners for the future. Well, I hope that's right, because that's how we see you. Yesterday, I was really pleased with my ministerial counterparts to announce that we're going to have a Raisina Down Under in Australia in 2024. I actually wonder if that's too culturally specific. Do the Indians understand what we mean when we say Down Under? That's us. But we are, I think that it will be an important event to continue the dialogue. As I said, we see India in the same way, a close partner. This is my second visit to India this year. This is the 19th Australian ministerial visit to India since the government was elected. 19. We've had 6 Indian ministerial visits to Australia, and of course we had, who could forget, the iconic images of our Prime Ministers in Ahmedabad, and of course the World Cup victory a couple of days ago. Credit to India, really, an amazing tournament and a fantastic side. And I think regardless of the outcomes, this cricket team will always be remembered as one of the greats. I've been in Delhi. I've been here in Delhi with the Deputy Prime Minister. He's also Australia's Defence Minister, for meetings with Dr. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister, and your Defence Minister. Now, the context for these meetings is a serious context. We do see more and more conflict in the world. We see Russia's war, what we regard as an illegal and immoral war on Ukraine. We see what is happening in what we describe the region as the Middle East, the continued holding of hostages by Hamas and Gaza in the grip of a humanitarian catastrophe. And we are working with countries with influence in the region to protect and support civilians, to help prevent conflict from spreading and to reinforce the need for a just and enduring peace. And in our own region, we face circumstances which in some ways are unprecedented. We see tensions rising between states with overlapping claims and disputed borders. Compounding that have been dangerous encounters on land, in the air and at sea. China continues to modernise its military at a pace and scale not seen in the world for nearly a century, with little transparency or assurance about its strategic intent. North Korea continues its destabilising behaviour with its ongoing nuclear weapons program and ballistic missile launches. I think anyone who lives in this region would know we are living in a time where our region is being reshaped. So the question is, are we going to take a part in that, play our part in it? influence the reshaping as best we can, or do we let others decide? Well, we are making a choice as two countries. Australia and India are making a choice to do what we can together and separately to shape a region that is peaceful and predictable, that is governed by accepted rules and norms where all of us can cooperate, trade and thrive. Where a larger country does not determine the fate of a smaller country and where each country can pursue its own aspirations. Where no one dominates and no one is dominated. So that's a vision of a region that is grounded in sovereignty. What is sovereignty? Well, fundamentally, it derives from being able to make your own decision, to shape your own destiny. But this is the thing about sovereignty. It might be exercised alone, but it can only be assured, but it is best assured when we work together. Because none of us can achieve the region with the attributes that I am describing by ourselves. And the less unified we are, the less we operate by the same rules, the more likely it is that vulnerabilities will be exploited. And that's why we are so committed to strong partnerships like the Quad and to mutually agreed rules that enable stability and choices, which again, in turn, means actually more autonomy, more sovereignty. Just as each country has a responsibility to help maintain the conditions for peace, we also have a responsibility to play our part in the collective deterrence of aggression. By having strong defence capabilities of our own and by working with partners like India, which is investing in its own capabilities, you know what we're doing? We're seeking to change the calculus for any potential aggressor. As I said, we've just had the 2+2 dialogue, foreign and defence. We see foreign and defence policies as two essential and interdependent part of our approach. That's why these meetings matter. This is about contributing to the strategic balance of power that keeps the balance in our region, where we have strategic reassurance through diplomacy and military deterrence, which supports it. I think, as India knows well, there's not enough strategic trust in the world and in our region. Military power is expanding, but measures to constrain military conflict are not, and there are insufficient concrete mechanisms to avert it. And the risk of conflict is of deep concern to us all. And that's why Australia continues to encourage mutual strategic reassurance, military risk reduction measures and open lines of communication at all levels. I want to make some brief remarks about the Indian Ocean. We all have a stake or a part to play in the Indian Ocean. We share a region and we share a future, and we are, as countries, joint custodians of the Indian Ocean. We share an interest in the countries of the Indian Ocean being prosperous and peaceful and resilient. Australia has one of the longest Indian Ocean coastlines of any country. We are responsible for its largest search and rescue zone. As Dr. Jaishankar has said, the separation of the Indian and Pacific Oceans as distinct compartments looks less and less tenable. We are quite visibly in each other's proximity, and to pretend otherwise is unrealistic. So this was recognised in one of the strategic documents that our government has recently completed, the Australia's Defence Strategic Review, which included the Northeast Indian Ocean alongside Southeast Asia and the Pacific as Australia's primary area of strategic interest. It is a conduit for global trade and energy production. Its sea lines of communications help underpin our security and prosperity. It has a third of the world's bulk cargo traffic and 2/3 of global oil shipments. It is essential to building a regional balance, and it is only becoming more important. In part, its rise is driven by demography. You are now home to the world's largest population, and countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh will also experience the so-called demographic dividend as they host some of the largest youth labour forces in the world until 2040. So it makes sense that the Indian Ocean it makes sense with the Indian Ocean's importance and its status as a point of confluence for strategic competition that Australia is seeking to boost our engagement with the region, opening new posts and, as I announced today, hosting the Indian Ocean Conference in Perth. And I look forward to welcoming Dr. Jaishankar and I hope many heads of government, ministers and senior delegates to discuss our priorities for the region. We turn now to our economic relationship. Your prosperity matters to Australia, and I think our prosperity matters to you. And geography might have decided that we share a regional interest, but we've decided to be friends. It was a choice. 50 years ago, we had a Prime Minister called Gough Whitlam, and he visited India. It was the first visit to India by an Australian Prime Minister in 14 years. And he said this at the time: "Here are two great democracies bordering the Indian Ocean, both members of the Commonwealth, both deeply dedicated to world peace, both with federal systems, and both holding great institutions in common." Well, we're very proud as an Australian government to take forward this legacy of engagement with India. And we make the same choice Whitlam did, to be closer friends with India. Our Prime Ministers have met 5 times this year, including once in Sydney, twice in India. We're partners in almost every pursuit, except perhaps cricket. We're working together through our comprehensive strategic partnership, through the Quad, through regional architecture and in the multilateral system. We are growing our economic partnership. We're looking to increase our trade. We're launching new climate initiatives in green steel and hydrogen, critical minerals, innovation and technology. So I hope that we are seeing the close cooperation between Australia and India that Prime Minister Whitlam envisaged come to pass. The relationship also benefits from another legacy of Gough Whitlam's, which was our immigration policy. You know, half of Australia's population was born overseas or have a parent born overseas, and I'm one of them. And what this means that when we look across the world, when Australians engage with the world, we see ourselves in it, just as the world can see so much of itself reflected in us. And this matters here today. One in every 25 Australians claims Indian heritage. It is our fastest growing and second largest diaspora community. And that's something we celebrate. We launched the Centre for Australia-India Relations during Prime Minister Modi's visit to Australia in May, at a small event attended by 20,000 members of your diaspora. That was not that small. The Centre is harnessing the energy and knowledge of our Indian community to grow our economic and political links. And the million-strong Indian tourists and students that visit our country each year also contribute to this goal. And it is in pursuit of this goal that I'm pleased to announce here today a new fellowship program. These new Maitree fellowships will see Indian researchers have an opportunity to spend 6 months to 2 years at an Australian think tank, and Australian researchers spend 6 months at an Indian institution. And this is because we recognise the important role that think tanks, civil society and other stakeholders play in this relationship. And frankly, I think it's also will be good for Australians to have the benefit of the perspective and wisdom of many of your thinkers. As Prime Minister Whitlam spoke about, we have a shared proud history as democracies that foster academic excellence and welcome a broad range of views. At a time when pluralism and democracy are being challenged worldwide, the next generation of Indians and Australians have a special responsibility to strengthen the institutions and the principles we hold dear. I had the opportunity to hear from some of your thinkers yesterday on the impact of gender on development policy, trade policy, foreign policy. And I spoke to them of my own party's commitment to having women in leadership positions. You know, having women at the decision-making table isn't just the right thing to do, it is. It actually leads to better decisions being made. Yeah, it means we bring a wider perspective, a wider set of experiences to those fora which make decisions, and that is a good thing. I've got the privilege of serving in a government that is more than half women. That took a bit of work. And I was sworn in alongside the most diverse parliament in Australia's history. And what I say to you is we believe that our multicultural democracy and the pluralism that accompanies it is essential to our ability to shape the region in which we live. We believe that this diversity is one of our greatest strengths. Australia sees the world as it is, but we seek to shape it for the better, and we want to do that with you. We want to meet the challenges of this moment and seize the opportunities of the decade ahead. I really look forward to answering questions, but I want to, if I may, end on this point. I have always believed that we are a stronger community, a stronger society, a stronger nation when all of our citizens' aspirations and capacities can be fully utilised. So in everything that you do as young women who have the privilege of attending such an extraordinary college, please remember your education, your opportunities, they are a great thing for you, but I truly believe they are a great thing for your country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Wong, for laying out in, I think, very succinctly the opportunities of the Indo-Pacific and the challenges of the Indo-Pacific, and also I think the cachet of goodwill that exists between India and Australia, and on which successive governments have tried to build this very, very important relationship. I am sure there are a number of questions here in the audience, and as you think about those questions, let me take the privilege of being the chair and ask the first question, and then in the meantime, please be prepared with your questions. Minister Wong, one thing that you mentioned, and I would also highlight and reiterate, is this. The engagement of youth with foreign policy. And as you rightly point out, at Observer Research Foundation, we carry out annual surveys on how the youth, India's youth is looking at our foreign policy priorities and where they see that their nation grow and move with the world that is changing rapidly around them. We find some very important aspirations that are reflected in that survey. But one of the things that we often also hear, especially in democracies like us, that there tends to be an amount of cynicism with politics. Now, when you have some of the brightest minds, young minds in this country sitting in this room, and they look at you as an exemplar, what do you tell them? That, look, how important is and you mentioned some of that in your concluding remarks, but I think to invite these young minds to play a part in nation building, in shaping not only their future, but also the future of their respective nations. What is it that Minister Wong would tell these young minds, and how do you see them shaping their aspirations as well as the aspirations of their nations?
Maybe we should ask them.
Yes, but they are looking at you.
Yeah, okay, they're looking at me at the moment. I think the first point I'd make to those who are cynical, I always say, and it's not an uncommon point that's made to me, I can't make a difference, you know, a lot of cynicism about politics and so forth. And I say, look, you can make a decision not to be interested in politics, but you can't make a decision not to be affected by it. So I've always taken the view, if I'm going to be affected by something, I'd rather be engaged rather than let it just happen. But the second point is a very interesting one, which is the involvement of young people in, I think you used the phrase building the nation and charting the course for the nation. I'm sure that every generation tells itself this is the most important time. But I do think this is a time of great change. And this is a time where, if you think about the history of the last, say, 100 years, World War I, World War II, what has occurred post-World War II, the post-World War II settlement, multilateral system, etc., etc. I think most people would look at where we are now and say this is a time where much of that is being reshaped. We talk about the Indo-Pacific and the reshaping in this region. And I mentioned in my speech our desire to be part of that reshaping. But the same reshaping is occurring globally. And India is part of that. And India is a very important part of that. So my observation would be, actually, this is a time where we need young people who are not just proud of their nation and want their nation to succeed, but also want to see a world in which we have peace and stability and prosperity, to think through and engage with that reshaping. Because in the absence of that, there are a lot of voices and a lot of forces who may not take this reshaping where we want it. So it matters.
So over to you. Please raise your hands. Yeah.
You know what's very funny? In these events, I usually say, I'm only going to take 2 questions from a man, the third has to be from a woman.
Yes,
but I don't have to worry
it has
about
to be
it,
the
right?
other way around. Yeah. Please, can you introduce yourself and
Good morning, ma'am. My name is Injila Himani and I am pursuing psychology honors from LSR. And my question to you is that as the first female leader of the government in Senate, what challenges did you face and how do you think your leadership has paved the way for other women in politics and those who aspire to join politics in the future?
Well, you know, you probably can guess a few of them, yes. But can I answer the second part of your question, because I actually think that's the more important. Being the first was something in various roles that I've had, was something I resisted a bit, because I always thought that the talking about that and being the role model was, I didn't want to just be that. Didn't want to just talk about being the first woman or the first Asian or whatever. But what I realised after being in politics for a while is actually the most important thing about being the first in anything is because there is a second and a third and many more. So I hope that me doing what I do has helped other women get into politics or whatever sphere you want to be in. And that we will see many more. And it is a great source of pride, but also relief to see so many more women in my party and in our cabinet.
Thank you, ma'am.
A very good afternoon, ma'am. Hello, sir. I'm Swati, a third-year student at Lady Shri College, and I'm also a member of an independent youth-led think tank, Geostrata. So, ma'am, my question to you is an extension of what you mentioned about Indo-Pacific, that there's a need for a free, open Indo-Pacific. So extending on that, ma'am, my question is, the Indo-Pacific region has recently witnessed an expansion of BRI in terms of digital Silk Route. And there have been almost 27 countries in the region which have signed a digital agreement, bilateral agreement with China. It certainly gives them opportunity to have a digital infrastructure being developed in their countries. However, it also gives Beijing an upper hand to have influence in the region. So, considering this fact, you know, this development is going to have a lot of establishment of undersea optic fiber cables along with the installation of CCTVs. And this certainly poses a surveillance concern in the region. So keeping these facts in mind, my question to you is how a grouping more democratic, which is more fair, like Quad, which includes Australia and India along with Japan and US, can come up with a digital order which is more open, which is more liberal, and is based on democratic principle, which not just counters China's influence in the region, but also provides an alternative to those countries.
China is doing what great powers do, which is utilising all aspects of its state power to advance its interests. And I say that without judgment. I make the observation that is what great powers do. It's what all states seek to do. China does it very effectively. Its economic reach is one element of its national power. So we understand that, and so does India, so does the world. The second point is developing country, or countries do need. There is a great need in the Indo-Pacific for more infrastructure, including digital infrastructure. I'm sure Professor could remind me what the what the investment gap is, but it's multi-billions and trillions. So we do, if we are interested in making, and the third point you make is actually what is the rules basis for the utilisation of this infrastructure and within this domain. That's a very important point, and your generation, I'm sure, will do better than mine. Because just as we sought trade rules or other rules of engagement between nations, or UNCLOS, the law of the sea, so too rules around digital access, digital infrastructure, artificial intelligence, they are as important to the interests of nation states and to the empowerment and protection of individual citizens as the rules that I've averted to. So yes, one, we do need to ensure there are choices for countries, and so the legitimate desire for more infrastructure is something on which they can make choices, consistent with my sovereignty discussion. Secondly, yes, I think the international community is not where we would want it to be in terms of having the rules-based framework for digital citizenship, engagement, infrastructure, etc., that we would want. So I think that's me saying, can you tell us what the answer is on the last one, isn't it? Thank you.
Greetings, ma'am. I'm Anvesha Mukherjee, pursuing Pol Science Honours first year. So coming from my interest in international relations, while I was reading about you, I found out how ardently you have been advocating to combat the climate crisis. And hence, in that context, considering the gravity of climate change mitigation or sustainable development and green infrastructure in the Indo-Pacific region stability, how would India and Australia leverage their strategic partnership and defence cooperation, which was also stated in the 2+2 ministerial dialogue? So how would that defence cooperation through the use of various aspects of climate diplomacy intertwine with the environmental security to fortify a joint commitment towards fostering an ecologically balanced future in the Indo-Pacific region?
So yes, I have been involved, just at the start of your question, obviously I was Australia's first climate minister, and I was in the climate negotiations in Copenhagen, which most of you probably may not know about, but it was a very difficult set of negotiations, and probably the moment where the world should have acted, could have acted, and didn't act. And, you know, that was a very, very distressing, actually, as a political person involved in that. But the fact that Copenhagen didn't get to where it was meant Paris happened, and then Paris meant Glasgow happened, etc. So we have progress. It's not as much as we would like and not as fast as we would like, and we need to do much more. So there is, I think, important work we can do together, Australia and India. We've talked today, well, actually the Prime Minister's announced an intention for a renewable energy partnership, or renewable technology partnership. I can't remember the nomenclature, but essentially where can we collaborate best? So we've been talking over the last couple of days about where that might be. There's certainly the solar panel supply chain is an area we can work together. I think there's more work we can do for green steel. The world will still need steel. It would be good if we could work out how we could generate that, or could create that without the sorts of emissions we see from steelmaking. They're just two examples. There is a third point, though, which is the national security implications of climate change, and your question goes to that, and that is a much longer discussion. I would tell you about an agreement we have just entered into or agreed with a small Pacific island country called Tuvalu, which is an atoll nation, which is already experiencing, and has been for some time, sea level rise impacting upon water quality and arable land. And we have struck an agreement with them as Australia that includes, amongst other things, the right to migration with dignity. So a certain number of Tuvaluans every year can become Australian citizens. Everybody's waving at me to stop. Is that right? No.
We have 5 minutes.
They're waving at you. But I hope, that's not so much with India, but it is us in our region, which is the Pacific region.
A very good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Saki Devan, and I'm a first-year student of Psychology Honours. So, my question is, in the face of economic challenges facing the world right now, how can the countries of Indo-Pacific region come together to promote regional economic integration, and what role can Australia play in the same?
Australia has actually been an advocate for more economic integration and more open, transparent trading arrangements for decades under both parties of government, which is interesting. So it's not a partisan issue like it is in some countries. And you know why? It's because our domestic economy is not big enough to sustain our standard of living without deep integration into global markets. And we were, that's something we've always understood. And it informs that economic imperative, informs our position on trade and economic integration, which is also informed by the fact that we are multilateralists fundamentally, and we like rules and norms and predictability as a middle power. So we will continue to advocate for trading arrangements which are fair, which are open and predictable. We want to do more with India. We obviously have a trade agreement with India which covers around 85% of our economies or relevant markets. There's more to do. Some of that's hard because there's economic sensitivities and political sensitivities. But we've always been a country that does think that we need to trade with each other. We need to be economically integrated for the benefit of our people, but also it does, I think, contribute to stability in the region.
Thank you, Minister Wong, and thank you all for these excellent questions. And I'm surprised by the range of these questions because Indo-Pacific is not something that perhaps in many of the textbooks you would find mentioned. So the fact that Indo-Pacific is being talked about and is being reflected in their conversations is a reflection perhaps of our times and of all the great work that you and your ministers have. Absolutely delighted to have you and to have all of you here this afternoon, this evening. Minister, thank you so much.